Sarah found the pregnancy test hidden beneath a stack of geometry worksheets in her 15-year-old niece Madison's desk drawer. The plastic stick seemed to burn in her hands as she stared at the two pink lines that would change everything. The late afternoon sun streaming through the bedroom window cast long shadows across the purple walls Madison had begged to paint last summer, back when their biggest worry was whether the color was too dark. Robert's heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs, each thud making Sarah's heart race faster. She could already picture his face, the way his jaw would clench, how the vein in his temple would pulse with barely contained fury. They'd taken Madison in after her parents died in the crash 3 years ago, promising to give her the stable home she deserved. Now this. What did you find? Robert's voice was eerily quiet as he appeared in the doorway, his 6'2" frame blocking out the hall light. Sarah wordlessly held out the test, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a storm of emotions: disbelief, betrayal, rage. The confrontation that followed would replay in Sarah's nightmares for years to come. Madison's tearful confession. Robert's thunderous shouting that shook family photos off the walls. The terrible silence when he finally declared, "Pack your things. You can't stay here anymore." "Robert, please," Sarah pleaded, though her own voice sounded distant and hollow. "She's just a child. Where will she go?" But Robert had already made up his mind. His face set like stone as Madison stuffed a few belongings into her old JanSport backpack. The same backpack she carried to her first day of high school, just months ago, decorated with pins and patches that now seemed to mock their failed attempts at normalcy. The screen door slammed with devastating finality as Madison stepped out into the gathering dusk. Sarah watched from the window as her niece's figure grew smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing around the corner where maple trees lined Carlton Avenue. The same street where Madison had learned to ride her bike, where they'd gone trick-or-treating, where they'd built countless snowmen during winter storms. That night, while Robert paced downstairs muttering about responsibility and consequences, Sarah lay awake listening to the wind rattling against the windows. She thought about Madison out there somewhere alone and scared. The maternal instinct to protect warred with her anger at the betrayal of trust, at the shattering of all their careful plans for Madison's future. Madison walked until her feet ached, each step taking her further from the only real home she'd known since the accident. The weight of her backpack seemed to increase with every block, as if filled with not just clothes but all the dreams and expectations she'd failed to live up to. The late September air carried a hint of autumn's chill, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself. The downtown streets of Cedar Grove looked different in the growing darkness. The familiar storefronts where she'd window shopped with friends now loomed mysterious and forbidding. The courthouse clock struck 9, its deep, resonant bells seeming to toll the death of her old life. She found herself drawn to St. Michael's Church, its Gothic spires reaching toward the star-scattered sky like outstretched arms. The heavy wooden doors creaked open at her touch, releasing a breath of incense-scented air. The sanctuary lay hushed and dim, illuminated only by the eternal flame and scattered votive candles. Madison slipped into a back pew, letting her backpack thud softly to the floor. The quiet pressed against her ears until it was broken by approaching footsteps. "Are you all right, dear?" The voice belonged to an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, who introduced herself as Ruth Anderson, the church secretary. Something in her gentle tone broke through Madison's carefully constructed walls, when the whole story came spilling out between sobs. Ruth listened without judgment, offering tissues and eventually hot chocolate from the church kitchen. As Madison's tears subsided, Ruth shared her own story of teenage pregnancy decades ago, of the harsh realities she'd faced, but also of the unexpected grace she'd found along the way. "Sometimes the hardest paths lead us exactly where we need to be," Ruth said, her weathered hands wrapped around her own mug. "There's a women's shelter in Springfield that helps young mothers. I can make a call if you'd like." Madison nodded, too exhausted to speak. That night, she slept on a cot in the church basement, Ruth's cardigan draped over her like a security blanket. In the morning, Father James drove her to Hope House, a renovated Victorian mansion where other girls with similar stories had found refuge. The next 6 months passed in a blur of prenatal appointments, GED classes, and group therapy sessions. Madison learned to cook nutritious meals on a budget, to navigate government assistance programs, to plan for a future that looked nothing like she'd imagined. The other girls at Hope House became a kind of family, sharing maternity clothes and midnight cravings, celebrating each small victory and holding each other through the hard days. When Emma Grace entered the world on a snowy April morning, Madison discovered a love she never knew existed. Her daughter's tiny fingers wrapped around her heart with impossible strength. And in those first precious moments of gazing into Emma's deep blue eyes, Madison found a purpose that transcended her fears. The staff at Hope House helped her transition to a small subsidized apartment, where she balanced motherhood with online classes and a part-time job at a local bakery. Her natural talent for decorating cakes soon earned her a promotion, and regular customers began requesting her designs specifically. Each paycheck brought her closer to stability. Each successful day added another brick to the foundation of her new life. But during quiet moments, when Emma was finally asleep and the apartment grew still, Madison would find herself thinking of her aunt and uncle. She wondered if they ever drove past her old schools, if they kept her school pictures on the walls, if they thought about her on her birthday. The anger had faded over time, replaced by a complicated mix of understanding and lingering hurt. 3 years passed this way, marked by Emma's first steps, first words, first Christmas mornings in their tiny apartment decorated with dollar store tinsel. Madison had just finished an online associate's degree in business management when Ruth's call came through. "Your Aunt Sarah has cancer," Ruth said gently. "Stage 3. She's been asking about you." The news hit Madison like a physical blow. She sat down hard on her secondhand couch, watching Emma stack blocks on the coffee table, blissfully unaware of how her mother's world had just shifted. "Does she want to see me?" Madison's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes, dear. They both do." The drive back to Cedar Grove felt surreal, like watching a familiar movie played in reverse. Emma babbled happily in her car seat, pointing out interesting clouds and colorful fall leaves. Madison's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as they passed the Welcome to Cedar Grove sign, its cheerful facade unchanged by the years of absence. St. Michael's Church looked exactly as she remembered, its red brick walls standing sentinel over her past. Ruth met them in the parking lot, enveloping Madison in a warm embrace before cooing over Emma's copper curls and dimpled cheeks. "Your aunt and uncle need to see this beautiful girl," Ruth said, smoothing Madison's hair with maternal affection. "And they need to see the amazing woman you've become." The walk to her old house felt like crossing an ocean. Each step brought back memories, jumping in leaf piles, walking home from school with friends, racing her bike down the sidewalk. Emma skipped alongside her, picking up acorns and asking endless questions about everything she saw. About all the twisted paths that somehow led to this moment. Sometimes, she realized, grace comes not in dramatic gestures but in small moments, in shared meals and bedtime stories, in the courage to try again, in the simple act of opening a door and saying welcome home. Emma's laughter rang out clear and bright, echoing off the walls that had once witnessed so much pain. Now they held something different, the sound of healing, of family being rebuilt one careful piece at a time, of love strong enough to bridge any distance. And in that laughter, Madison heard the future calling, not perfect, but real and rich with possibility. She squeezed Emma's hand under the table and smiled, ready at last to write the next chapter of their story together. The weeks that followed blended together like watercolors on canvas, each day adding new layers to their evolving family portrait. Madison found herself spending more time at the old house, helping Sarah tend her beloved garden while Emma and Robert worked on building a treehouse, a project that seemed to heal something in both of them. Sarah's chemotherapy sessions became family affairs, with Madison bringing homemade ginger cookies to help with the nausea while Emma entertained the other patients with her impromptu dance performances. The sterile hospital walls seemed less daunting when filled with a child's laughter and the smell of fresh-baked comfort. During one particularly difficult session, Sarah reached for Madison's hand, her own cool and pale against the hospital sheets. "I've been keeping something for you," she whispered, her voice tired but determined. "In the attic, there's a cedar chest with your mother's things. I could never bring myself to open it after, but I think it's time." That weekend, while Emma was napping and Robert took Sarah for her doctor's appointment, Madison climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. Dust motes danced in the streams of sunlight, filtering through the dormer windows, giving the space an ethereal quality. The cedar chest sat exactly where she remembered, its brass hinges gleaming dully in the afternoon light. Inside, she found carefully preserved pieces of her past. Her mother's wedding dress, yellowed photographs of family vacations, report cards from elementary school with her mother's proud comments in the margins. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a collection of letters her mother had written during her own pregnancy with Madison. Hopes, fears, and dreams penned in familiar, looping handwriting. Reading them felt like having a conversation across time, hearing her mother's voice in a way she hadn't since the accident. "My dearest baby," one letter began, "I don't know yet if you're a boy or a girl, but I already know you're going to change the world in your own special way." Madison traced the words with trembling fingers, recognizing in them the same fierce love she felt for Emma. The discovery sparked something new in their healing process. Madison began bringing pieces of her mother's legacy to share during family dinners, stories, recipes, old home movies that Robert converted from VHS. Emma absorbed everything with wide-eyed wonder, especially delighting in photos of her grandmother at her age. As autumn deepened into winter, they established new traditions while honoring old ones. Sunday dinners became sacred, with Emma helping Sarah measure ingredients while Madison and Robert debated politics over coffee. They started a family book club, taking turns reading chapters aloud while sharing hot chocolate and Sarah's famous snickerdoodles. The house itself seemed to come alive again, shaking off years of quiet grief. Emma's artwork began appearing on the refrigerator, her toys scattered across the living room floor like cheerful landmines. The spare room gradually transformed into a space for her, decorated with butterfly decals and strings of fairy lights. Sarah's condition fluctuated like the winter weather, good days followed by bad, small victories overshadowed by setbacks. But even on the hardest days, when pain etched deep lines around her eyes, she found strength in watching Emma and Madison together, in seeing the legacy of love continue despite past mistakes. Robert threw himself into grandfather duties with unexpected enthusiasm. He learned to braid Emma's hair, studied up on current children's literature, and even let her paint his toenails during their weekly spa days. The man who had once been so rigid with rules now found himself building blanket forts in the living room and making up silly songs about purple unicorns. Madison watched these transformations with a mixture of amazement and cautious joy. Her own healing came in waves, triggered by small moments. Finding her old growth charts penciled on the kitchen doorframe, discovering Robert had kept every school photo in his wallet, hearing Sarah humming her favorite lullaby to Emma at bedtime. As Christmas approached, they tackled holiday preparations together. The house filled with the scents of baking and pine needles, while carols played softly in the background. Emma insisted on making homemade ornaments for everyone at her preschool, covering the dining room table with glitter that would probably survive until next December. During the annual Christmas Eve service at St. Michael's, Madison sat between her aunt and uncle, Emma dozing against her shoulder. Ruth caught her eye from the choir loft and winked, her silver hair glowing in the candlelight. The familiar carols washed over them, and Madison felt tears prick her eyes as she remembered other Christmas Eves in this same sanctuary. Later that night, after Emma was tucked in a bed dreaming of Santa, Madison found Robert in his study. He was looking at old photo albums, one finger tracing the image of Madison at her fifth-grade graduation. "I've been thinking," he said without looking up, "about selling the hardware store." Madison blinked in surprise. The store had been in Robert's family for 3 generations. "But you love that store," she protested. "I do," he nodded slowly. "But I love my family more, and I'm tired of missing moments I can't get back." He finally met her eyes. "The franchise in Springfield is looking to expand. They need someone with experience to manage their new location. Understanding dawned slowly. You want to move closer to us? If you'll have us, he said quietly. Sarah's oncologist has a colleague at Springfield Memorial, and the treatment options there are actually better. We could help with Emma while you finish your degree. Maybe even open a small business together someday. You've got quite a talent for those fancy cakes. Madison sat down heavily in the leather armchair that had been her favorite reading spot as a child. The possibility of having her family truly reunited, of Emma growing up with her grandparents nearby, seemed almost too good to be true. "What about the house?" she asked, looking around at the walls that held so many memories. "Houses are just buildings," Robert said, surprising her again. "Home is where your family is. We learned that the hard way, didn't we?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her favorite quilted robe. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. Too excited about tomorrow morning. She settled onto the couch beside Robert, their hands finding each other automatically. "Have you told her about Springfield?" Madison looked at her aunt and uncle, seeing not the authority figures who had once judged and banished her, but two people who had learned and grown, who were willing to rebuild their lives around the possibility of redemption. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice catching. "It's a big change." "Change is good," Sarah said firmly. "Look how far we've come already." She patted the space beside her on the couch, and Madison moved to join them, feeling like a child again in the best possible way. They talked late into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Outside, snow began to fall, each flake carrying its own small possibility of transformation. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight, and Christmas Day began with 3 generations of healing hearts gathered in the warm light of understanding. Madison thought about the long road that had led them here, through grief and anger, through separation and growth, through illness and reconciliation. She thought about Emma sleeping upstairs, about the precious gift of family she would now have, about the strength that comes from facing hard truths together. The future stretched before them like fresh snow, unmarked and full of possibility. There would be challenges ahead. Sarah's continuing treatment, the logistics of moving, the everyday complications of blending their lives together. But they would face them as a family stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. As if reading her thoughts, Sarah squeezed her hand. "Remember what your mother always used to say. Love is like water. It finds a way through any crack, wearing down the hardest stones until they become smooth enough to hold." Madison smiled, remembering finding those exact words in one of her mother's letters that afternoon. The circle felt complete somehow, generations of love and wisdom flowing through them like a river, carrying away old pain and nourishing new growth. Tomorrow, Emma would wake them all too early, exclaiming over Santa's presents and insisting on pancakes for breakfast. They would take pictures and make memories, adding new pages to their family story. But for now, in the quiet hours of Christmas morning, they sat together in peaceful understanding, watching snow transform the world outside into something new and beautiful. And in that moment, Madison knew with absolute certainty that they had all found their way home. In the months that followed, their plans took shape like a garden coming to life in spring. The hardware store sold quickly, a younger couple eager to carry on its legacy in Cedar Grove. Sarah's medical team coordinated seamlessly with their Springfield counterparts, ensuring continuity of care. Emma's excitement about having her grandparents nearby knew no bounds. She drew countless pictures of their future activities together, filling page after page with colorful possibilities. The process of combining households became a journey of rediscovery. Each box packed revealed forgotten treasures. Madison's first attempt at creative writing, carefully preserved by Sarah. A Mother's Day card Emma had made at preschool, already hanging in Robert's office. Photo albums spanning decades of family history, waiting to be shared with a new generation. They found a house halfway between Madison's apartment and the hospital, a rambling Victorian with a wraparound porch and plenty of room for everyone. The garden needed work, but Sarah's eyes lit up at the possibility of creating something new. Robert immediately began planning renovations, his architectural drawings spreading across the dining room table like maps to their future. Madison watched it all unfold with a sense of wonder, remembering the scared teenager who had once walked away from this family, never imagining she would find her way back. Now here they were, planning Sunday dinners and holiday traditions, discussing paint colors and furniture arrangements, building a life that encompassed all their stories, the painful and the beautiful, the broken and the healed. Life had taught them all that love wasn't about perfect moments or unblemished records. It was about showing up day after day, choosing to stay even when it was hard. It was about making room for growth and change, about holding space for both joy and sorrow, about believing in the possibility of renewal even in the darkest times. As she watched Emma help Sarah plant roses in their new garden, while Robert assembled a tire swing that old marked this home as theirs, Madison felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. They had all been transformed by their journey, not into perfect people, but into more compassionate, understanding versions of themselves. The future stretched before them, like an open road, full of possibilities they were finally ready to explore together. And somewhere, Madison knew, her parents were smiling down on this unexpected miracle, a family broken and scattered, now gathering strength from its very scars, growing into something more beautiful than they could have imagined. In the end, it wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending it hadn't happened. It was about learning from it, growing through it, and choosing every day to build something new from the pieces they'd been given. Together, they were writing a new story, one of second chances, of grace found in unexpected places, of love strong enough to bridge any distance and heal any wound. And that, perhaps, was the greatest miracle of all. The miracle's ripples spread outward like waves on a pond, touching not just their immediate family, but the whole community they were building. Madison's bakery business flourished in Springfield, with Robert helping her develop a business plan that soon led to her own storefront. Sweet Second Chances became known not just for Madison's artistic cakes, but for its welcoming atmosphere and the way 3 generations worked together behind the counter. Emma grew into her role as the heart of their blended family, her natural empathy drawing people together. She started a Grandparents and Me club at her elementary school, inspired by her own experience of finding family later in life. Sarah, between treatments, became a regular guest speaker, sharing stories that helped other families navigate their own reconciliations. The Victorian house transformed with each passing season. The wraparound porch hosted summer gatherings where neighborhood children played while adults shared iced tea and stories. The garden Sarah cultivated became a community attraction, with master gardeners seeking her advice on growing heritage roses. Robert's workshop in the converted garage turned into a mentoring space where he taught local kids woodworking, passing on skills his own father had taught him. Their story spread through Springfield, carried by customers at the bakery and patients in Sarah's support group. Other fractured families began reaching out, seeking advice on healing their own wounds. Madison found herself sharing her journey at community centers and church groups, her words carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. Ruth from St. Michael's became a frequent visitor, her silver hair now completely white, but her eyes still twinkling with the same kindness that had once saved a frightened teenage girl. She watched with quiet satisfaction as the seeds of grace she'd planted years ago bore fruit beyond anything she could have imagined. The years brought changes as years do. Sarah's cancer went into remission, then returned, then retreated again, a battle fought with the strength of 3 generations behind her. Each hospital stay became an opportunity for family storytelling, with Emma orchestrating elaborate puppet shows in the oncology ward and Madison bringing treats for all the nurses. Robert's hardware expertise found new expression in community service projects, organizing volunteers to repair homes for elderly neighbors and single parents. He often said it was his way of paying forward the grace he'd received, though everyone knew it was also his therapy, working with his hands to rebuild what time and circumstance had broken. Madison's online business degree led to an unexpected partnership with Hope House, developing a training program for young mothers to start their own small businesses. She never forgot her own journey and made sure each participant had not just skills but a support network to lean on. MS childhood diary, D. Discovered years later, captured the transformation in crayon drawings and careful cursive. Today, Grandpa taught me about different kinds of wood. Grandma let me help deadhead the roses. Mom made a cake that looked like a castle. I have the best family in the whole world. As they approached the 10th anniversary of their reunion, Madison found herself sitting on the porch swing late one evening, watching fireflies dance in the garden. Sarah joined her, moving more slowly now, but still carrying that same quiet strength. I was thinking about time, Sarah said, settling beside her. How it folds back on itself sometimes, healing old wounds we thought would hurt forever. Madison nodded, remembering all the layers of their journey. The pain of separation, the courage of return, the daily small acts of love that had rebuilt their world. Do you ever wonder what Mom and Dad would think of all this? Sarah smiled, her face softening in the twilight. They're here in everything we do, in your strength, in Emma's laugh, in the way Robert teaches patience through woodworking just like your father did. Love doesn't end. It just changes form. Inside, they could hear Emma practicing piano while Robert hummed along, probably working on his latest restoration project. The sounds drifted out through open windows, mixing with cricket's song and distant church bells. Their family story had become woven into the fabric of the community, a testament to the power of second chances and the strength found in vulnerability. Other families seeking reconciliation often started their journey in Madison's bakery, drawn by the warmth and understanding they found there. The original pain had transformed into something precious, not forgotten, but integrated into a larger story of redemption. They had learned that healing wasn't a destination, but a continuing journey, each day bringing new opportunities to choose love over fear, understanding over judgment. Emma, now a teenager herself, often said their family was like one of her mother's cakes, made of distinct layers held together by something sweet, decorated with both planned patterns and beautiful accidents, meant to be shared with others. The metaphor was apartment. They had taken the broken pieces of their past and, with time and patience, created something new, not perfect, but perfectly theirs. Their story continued to unfold, each chapter adding depth and meaning to the ones before. In quiet moments, Madison would sometimes catch Robert watching them all with wonder in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe this was his life now. Sarah's garden journals filled with not just plant notes, but family observations, precious moments preserved in her elegant handwriting. Emma's art covered the walls, each piece capturing some aspect of their shared journey. They had learned that family wasn't just about blood or perfect records or meeting expectations. It was about showing up every day with an open heart. It was about making room for growth and change, about holding space for both joy and sorrow, about believing in the possibility of renewal even in the darkest times. Their story became a beacon for others, proving that broken things could be made beautiful again, that love could bridge any distance, that grace could transform the deepest wounds into sources of strength and wisdom. And so they continued forward together, 3 generations strong, their combined love creating ripples that touched countless other lives. Their journey had taught them that every ending was just another beginning in disguise, every challenge an opportunity for growth, every moment a chance to choose love again. In the end, they had created something far more precious than a perfect family. They had built a home where grace dwelled, where healing was an ongoing practice, where love grew stronger with each passing season. And in that continuous act of choosing each other, day after day, they found the truest meaning of family. The story didn't end there, of course. Stories like there's never really end. They continue in the lives they touch, in the hope they inspire, in the love they pass down through generations. And in that continuation lies the greatest miracle of all, the endless possibility of beginning again, of finding beauty in the broken places, of love strong enough to transform everything it touches. That love's transformative power became evident in countless unexpected ways as the years continued to unfold. Emma, now entering her college years, chose to study family therapy, inspired by the healing she'd witnessed in her own family. Her undergraduate thesis focused on intergenerational trauma and reconciliation. Using anonymous versions of their story alongside others she'd collected from the community that had grown around their bakery. The bakery itself had evolved into something far beyond its original vision. Sweet Second Chances now included a community center in its upper floor, where support groups met weekly to share their own journeys of reconciliation. Madison's custom cakes became known not just for their artistry, but for the stories they told, each one celebrating moments of healing, reunion, and newfound joy. Sarah's battle with cancer had taught them all about the strength found in vulnerability. Though the treatments had taken their toll, her spirit remained undiminished. She started a garden therapy program at the hospital, turning the oncology ward's courtyard into a haven of blooming hope. Patients found healing not just in the flowers she taught them to tend, but in the gentle wisdom she shared about growth, resilience, and the beauty of second chances. Robert's transformation continued to amaze everyone who knew their history. The man who had once been so rigid with rules and expectations now led workshops on forgiveness and family reconciliation. His woodworking classes became metaphors for rebuilding relationships, teaching patience the art of seeing beauty in flawed materials, and the understanding that sometimes the strongest bonds came from carefully mending what was broken. Their Victorian home had become a gathering place for a new kind of family, one built not just on blood ties, but on shared experiences of loss, hope, and redemption. Holiday celebrations now included others who were in the process of reconciliation, creating a tapestry of healing that stretched far beyond their original story. Madison often found herself reflecting on the journey during quiet moments in the bakery's kitchen, where the scent of vanilla and warm sugar brought back memories of those first tentative steps toward healing. She remembered the scared teenage girl she'd been, the strength she'd found in motherhood, and the unexpected grace that had led her back home. The recipe books she'd inherited from her mother now sat alongside her own creations, flour-dusted notebooks filled with not just instructions for cakes and pastries, but with margins annotated with family stories, customer celebrations, and moments of breakthrough in their ever-expanding community. Emma's influence rippled outward in its own unique way. Her Grandparents and Me Club had grown into a regional program, bridging generational gaps in families struggling with their own histories of estrangement. She had her grandmother's gift for nurturing growth in others, combined with her mother's resilient spirit and her grandfather's newfound wisdom about the nature of forgiveness. Their story continued to evolve, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined. Former Hope House residents brought their children to the bakery, sharing tales of their own journeys toward stability and success. Sarah's garden became a place where other cancer survivors found peace and purpose, while Robert's woodworking students discovered that crafting furniture could heal both hands and hearts. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared, they had transformed into something precious, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with gold. Their family's fractures had become the very places through which light now shone most brightly, illuminating paths for others seeking their way home. Time moved forward, marking its passage in small moments of grace. Emma's graduation, where 3 generations stood proud. Quiet evenings in Sarah's garden, sharing tea and memories. Busy mornings in the bakery, where the aroma of fresh bread mingled with the sound of healing laughter. Weekends in Robert's workshop, where rough wood became smooth under patient hands. They had learned that love wasn't a finite resource to be hoarded or withheld, but a living force that grew stronger with each person it embraced. Their family had expanded far beyond blood ties, creating a community bound together by shared stories of redemption and renewal. Madison's original journey from fear to forgiveness had become just one thread in a much larger tapestry. Each person who found their way to Sweet Second Chances, whether for a wedding cake or a support group meeting, added their own colors to the pattern, creating something more beautiful than any single story could tell. The future continued to unfold with infinite possibility, each day bringing new opportunities for growth and connection. They had discovered that healing wasn't a destination, but a continuing journey, one that spiraled upward like the grand staircase in their Victorian home, each turn revealing new perspectives on the path they'd traveled. In the end, their greatest legacy wasn't the bakery, or the garden, or even the community they'd built. It was the living proof that love could transcend any boundary, heal any wound, and transform even the deepest pain into something beautiful. Their story continued to ripple outward, touching lives they would never know, offering hope to those still finding their way back home. And in that endless possibility of renewal, in the daily choice to love and grow and begin again, they found the truest meaning of family, not as a fixed point to return to, but as an ever-expanding circle of grace, strong enough to hold whatever the future might bring. The miracle was no longer just their own story of reconciliation, but the countless others that had grown from its seeds. Like Sarah's garden, like Robert's woodwork, like Madison's cakes, like Emma's outreach. Each piece contributed to a larger whole, creating something far more beautiful than they could have imagined when they first began their journey of healing. And so their story continued to unfold, not ending but transforming, each chapter adding depth and meaning to the ones before, proving that love's capacity for renewal was truly limitless. In the light of that understanding, every moment became a chance to choose love again, to reach out across whatever distances remained, to believe in the possibility of healing one more time. Their legacy lived on in every person who found hope in their story, in every family that dared to try again, in every heart that opened to the possibility of forgiveness. And in that continuing miracle of transformation, they discovered that love's greatest power lay not in perfection, but in its endless ability to begin again, to grow through the broken places, to find beauty in the very act of healing. This, too, was part of their story, not an ending, but a continuing testament to the power of love to transform everything it touched, creating ripples that would touch lives far beyond their own, offering hope to generations yet to come. And in that endless possibility of renewal, they found the truest meaning of grace.